Hi everybody, this is Heath Close with Buildbox, and I'd like to welcome you to part 2 of our 3-part series on isometric games in Buildbox. In part 2, I'm going to walk you through making some isometric art, and we are going to look at some options for programs for making isometric art. And the first program I'll show you and walk you through making art in is called Inkscape, which is a free and open source 2D vector graphics program. We are also going to take a look at Hexels 2, which is a 2D grid-based painting program that also animates and is a paid program, but also has a 14-day free trial. So give it a whirl. You might prefer it over our free option. So let's get started. Head over to inkscape.org and go to Download and get the proper version for either Windows or Mac. You will need to also download Xquartz if you are on a Mac to run Inkscape. Just follow the install instructions and you will get Inkscape up and running. Once Inkscape is installed, start the program and Inkscape will begin a new project for you. Go to File and open the Document Properties. We are going to resize the document to mimic the physical pixels of an iPhone 6 Plus or 7, so change the units to pixels and change the width to 1080 and the height to 1920. Next, we are going to go to the Guides tab and make sure Show Guides is checked. Now, in the Grids tab, change the grid type to Isometric. Proof I wasn't making that word up in part 1, and hit New. Make sure to change the grid units to pixels and make sure that your angles are at 30 degrees. That should also look familiar to you from part 1 of this series. Now, make your spacing a division of 1247.075. It doesn't matter how I came up with that number for you. All that matters is that is the magic number for making this grid match the screen size. Just use it as your baseline. So if you want a nice big grid, divide that number by 10 and use 124.7075. You will see the grid ends perfectly with the screen. If you want it even smaller, divide it by 20. In any event, don't get hung up on this number. You can reference this video at any time to recall it. We are going to close the document property window now and turn our attention to the snapping options on the far right-hand side. You want to make sure to enable the following settings. Enable snapping, snap bounding boxes, snap bounding box corners, snap nodes, paths, and handles, snap cusp nodes, including rectangle corners, snap other points like centers, guide origins, gradient handles, etc., and then snap to grids and snap guides. Okay, let's get started. We're going to make a simple ISO jump game. Select the pen tool and select Create a series of straight line segments. Start with drawing a platform for the character to run on. Left-click on the left side of the screen and get a straight line along the grid, and left-click on the right side of the screen. Continue left-clicking until you have drawn parallel lines for your platform. Then right-click to close the shape. Now we need to fill it with a color, so let's talk about our light source. Remember the 3D animation I showed you in part 1? I had one light source in that scene. As you can see, it was low and to the right, making the front of the cube the lightest, the top side the second lightest, and the farthest side in the shadows the darkest. Imitating this kind of lighting is essential to giving your isometric art the proper look. Let's say, for this game, our light source is up and to the right. Let's head over to Peloton.com and find ourselves a nice palette to work with. I like this site for isometric art because it quickly shows different shades of your colors to mimic isometric lighting. Play around with the controls, making sure to select Triad and add complementary color. In the lower left-hand corner, click on the chosen stroke color, and that will open the Stroke Paint tab. Click on the X to remove the lines we drew. Now in the Fill tab, let's paste in a color from our palette we chose and give our platform a surface. You might find on a Mac that Command V doesn't work. You need to use Control V, just like any undos in Inkscape on a Mac is Control Z. And once your color is pasted in, you won't see your color until you drag the alpha channel up. Let's repeat the process and give our platform a ledge. 2 units should give us a nice perspective. Let's make our ledge here darker, as this is farther away from our light source and in the shadows. Now let's give our platform a kind of sidewalk or runway. 2 or 3 units from the edge should work nice. And finally, let's give it some kind of marking on the side so we can tell this whole thing is moving once we get it in the game. Now let's go up to the Layer menu and add a new layer called Player. We can also show the Layer tab by going to the Layer menu and selecting Layers at the bottom. We can then add, subtract, or reorder layers there if we so choose. Let's make sure we are on the Player layer and get our pen tool to create our character. I'm going to make an isometric cube as our character, and I'm going to draw it in 3 different sections so I can select each section separately and color them individually. I'm going to select the section that would be farthest from our light source and get rid of my stroke paint, and pick our darkest character color from the palette and fill it in, bringing my alpha channel up so I can see it. Repeating the process for the other sections, we now have a complete character on its own layer. Let's add another layer and call it Enemy. Making sure that we are on the Enemy layer, I'm going to repeat a similar process as our character and create an isometric block our player has to jump over. Now our scene is almost ready to export. This is, of course, an extremely simple example of a game scene, but you can make this as complex as you see fit and add as many variations as you need. Before we export our isometric assets to use in Buildbox, let's do a little housekeeping. This will also help to optimize our atlas count inside of Buildbox. You can find more information on atlas size and optimization on the Buildbox forums. Exporting that entire platform just isn't necessary. You can see in the Isometric guide that there are 4 major divisions to our scene. Let's cut away all but one section of our platform so we can minimize the platform's footprint within the atlases. First, hide the other layers so you only see the platform showing. Then select the Rectangle and Square tool. Draw a rectangle over the section of platform we want to keep, then go to Edit and select All, then go to Object, Clip, Set. Now our platform is cropped to a 1/4 section. If you are familiar with Buildbox, you know that once we get these assets into Buildbox, we will want to set up collision shapes for each item. That platform will be a bit of a hassle getting the angle right, doing it by eye. So let's do ourselves a favor and add a new layer and call it Collision Guide. Let's unhide our character, and then making sure that we are on the Collision Guide layer, let's grab the pen tool and draw a straight line with a handle on the end that has a guide as to how far away from our sidewalk we want this line to be. Make it plenty wider than the platform so we can easily select it within the object's default animation layer. Don't worry if this step doesn't quite make sense yet. It will when I show you how to use it when we get our assets into Buildbox. Let's fill in the handle so it's easier to click on and select later in Buildbox. Now we are ready to export each layer individually. Let's hide every layer except our platform layer. Select everything and then go to File, Export PNG Image. In the Export dialog, click on Selection. Be sure to name it and place it somewhere easy to find and click Export. Now let's get the next layer visible by itself and export that out as well. Repeat the process until everything has been exported. Before we move on to part 3, I mentioned at the beginning that I was going to show you a paid option as well. Making isometric art with Hexels 2 is mad quick. And there are plenty of fast and easy ways to affect your image. It's also capable of animation, and you can always export your layers and use a free program like GIMP to achieve anything you want for rotation and auto cropping. So check out the Hexels 2 free trial. Okay, now that we have our assets ready, in the next video, we are going to import them into Buildbox. So come on back for that one, and I will see you in part 3.